Welcome to episode 39 of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. In this insightful episode, I and my brilliant co-hosts Alison Ettridge and Toby Coulshaw from Lightcast had the pleasure of speaking with Kumar Vaibhav, a seasoned TI professional who's built functions at Amazon, Walmart, Philips, Amdocs and now Atlassian. In the news segment, we celebrated Lightcast's acquisition of Rhetoric, bringing 800 million profiles and contact data to the TI world, explored the latest from RecFest, where TI has become so embedded across TA that it no longer needs its own stage, and discussed the growing importance of skills intelligence in bridging the gap between strategic workforce planning and talent execution. In our conversation with Kumar, we explored his fascinating journey from market research to becoming a TI leader, including his theatrical background and how storytelling skills translate perfectly to compelling TI presentations, his serendipitous career leap from Korn Ferry to Philips, thanks to Toby's skills-based hiring approach, how building rapport and transparency with stakeholders transforms TI from order taking to strategic partnership, his innovative location strategy work at Walmart using travel patterns and borough analysis during COVID, the evolution of TI teams in India and why they're becoming global centres of excellence, his existential crisis moment when Toby texted asking, "Are we even adding any value?" Spoiler, they are. And 3 essential tips for building world-class TI functions. So, grab your favourite beverage, settle in for practical wisdom from the trenches, and discover how to build TI functions that truly drive business value. So get listening, get learning, and stay intelligent, folks. Have fun! Before we get on with the main event, I wanted to remind you that Lightcast kindly sponsors this podcast. Here's a very well-spoken chap to tell you more about them.
Lightcast is the global authority on labour market data. By collecting, analysing and refining profiles, job postings and market data globally, Lightcast provides actionable, data-driven talent intelligence, giving HR leaders the context to make better decisions. The world's top companies trust Lightcast to deliver clarity in a complex world of work. For more, visit lightcast.io.
Welcome. Ever wondered what it takes to build a world-class TI function from scratch at some of the biggest tech companies in the world? Or how to transform raw data into strategic workforce insights that drive real business decisions? Well, in this episode, which I believe is episode 39 of the TI Collective podcast, we've got someone who's mastered both the art and science of talent intelligence.
Yay!
In the virtual studio with me today are my brilliant co-hosts, Alison Ettridge and Toby Coulshaw, both from Lightcast. Give us a wave, you two, or a virtual wave.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. Now, today's guest is a true TI professional who's built and led TI functions at Amazon, Walmart, Philips, and now, more recently, Atlassian. He's someone who understands both, as we said, the art of stakeholder engagement and the science of analytics. Please welcome Kumar from Atlassian. Kumar, can you do a quick introduction?
Sure, thanks, Alan. Thanks for the kind words. Hi, everyone. I'm Kumar. As Alan mentioned, I've been in TI domain for more than 10, 11 years now. And I've worked in companies like Amazon, Walmart, Philips, Amdocs lately, and now in Atlassian. I'm really excited for this podcast. I've been listening to this. So there are some anecdotes that I'll share which are linked with this podcast, but really excited to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're equally excited to have you and looking forward to the interview a little later. But before we get on to that, for those that are new to our podcast, and we have new listeners every single month, here's how we roll. First up, we'll have Toby giving us his trademark market intelligence or talent intelligence roundup. And then Alison will be leading our chat with Kumar, and knowing her, she'll get right into the heart of what makes him tick and talent intelligence in his world work. So, Toby, what's happening, as I always say? What's happening in the world of TI?
I'm glad we're getting onto this because I'm terrified about what anecdotes Kumar might be spilling the beans on and whether I'm involved in any of them. So let's just pad the news out as long as we can so I don't have to get thrown under the bus anywhere. So I'm going to be really selfish and start off with some Lightcast news. So Lightcast acquired Rhetoric so that we could expand our people and company labour market data, which I'm very excited by. Obviously, doing what we do, having access to more data is only ever going to be a good thing. And Rhetoric comes in at a huge data set. It's 800 million profiles, 280 million company records, 250 million office locations. It's got like 12 years of company financials. So I'm really excited by it, about the potential for it, the new tooling we can build out, and what we can do from a professional services perspective. So I'm purely selfishly incredibly excited about the fact we get to play with all of this new data.
I think it's very cool. And I think you're right, it is a bit selfish for us to talk about this, but actually it's big news in the HR tech world, because I think for the first time what we're heading to is an organisation that specialises in TI that can now get to the point where we can provide contact data. And so suddenly that's about actionable TI and not just the aggregated anonymised stuff. And that could be super exciting for clients, and it leads to an uplift in profile data for all of our clients and an enrichment of current records. Yeah, but I think the bigger strategic piece is the bit that's most important, which is, how do we help to support making TI actionable in companies? I think that's very cool.
And for those the uninitiated, i.e. me, who were Rhetoric or who are Rhetoric now as a Lightcast company, of course? What do they do?
Yeah, really good question. So they are a gatherer of profile information and information about people, all fully compliant as you would expect. Typically, they were selling for sales and marketing user cases. Okay, yeah. And in fact, they were one of the providers into Stratagens from a profile services point of view. So it's a movement of user case from sales and marketing to talent, which feels like a really natural fit, right? But hasn't happened anywhere else before.
I guess good data is good data, isn't it? It doesn't actually matter what the purpose was for before. If it's something that can be repurposed in another world and it's good quality, clean data that's extensive, it's good quality, clean data.
100%, right? Yeah. If you've got data that can be used for sales prospecting, then in theory you've got data that can be used for talent acquisition, right? Yeah. So it's a repurposing of a really comprehensive data set. It could be really exciting.
No, it's very exciting. And we don't really talk about Lightcast all that much, so I think every so often it's perfectly justified.
Glad you appreciate that.
Yeah.
And, it would be good if we didn't have to make a massive acquisition in order to just be talked about, though. Just future reference.
Kumar.
And listen, do they have a specific focus on the US, UK, or is it global?
No, it's global.
Okay.
Yeah, and genuinely global data. So we'll see an uplift of at least 20% in the underlying profile data, which is really interesting.
So I think it's benefiting twofolds. Along with the information that you mentioned about the profiles, I think this gives us a data point to validate the already available talent pool that is there, which is on the platform. So I think it's solving that purpose as well.
Yeah, and that's the point, isn't it, Kumar? I think, when lots of organisations, we can touch on this a bit later, but lots of organisations who are on the TI journey are not at the strategic end. Yeah. They're not at the how do we influence where we grow or what we're doing. They're still on the, well, how do I get hold of the people that I need? Yeah. And so to be able to support and it almost feels like historically, and this is not Lightcast related, but historically, if you look at lots of TI platforms, and I would have lumped Stratagens into this, we go, there's no people in the world and there's really high demand. Right, yeah. So all we're doing is giving you data that tells you a problem. Right? It doesn't necessarily help you solve it. The concept of being able to say, and this is how you solve it. I think that's the bit that's interesting with this acquisition.
Yeah, exciting.
I think the bit I like is I've often had the conversation when I've been in-house where I've been using a TI platform and it's like, all right, we've got this macro view of like the government data, for example, and we've got the micro view of the profile level from whatever source you use and that. but it's tying it together for that meso piece. And it's that line of sight between the really big data and the really little data. And for me, that opportunity to bring that together is really exciting, because suddenly you do get that consistency of methodology, the consistency of story. So you can see the same story, whether you're talking about, a workforce planning location strategy, 50,000 foot, and then it gets to the point where it's like rubber hits the road, we've got to actually deliver this. And the TA team and the sourcing team on the ground can use exactly the same tooling, exactly the same piece to run with it. And for me, that's really exciting, because it suddenly gives a level of transparency and trust in the data throughout the whole process, which I think is really cool.
It's one of the things we've talked about when we talk about internal and external data, isn't it? Is that needs to be in the same language to bring the power out, and it's the same between the micro and the macro, right? In order to bring the power out, it needs to be in the same language, so you're not having to translate the data the whole time.
Exactly that.
What else is happening in the world, Toby?
I've been out and about. I've been in a field in Nebworth.
You've been allowed out, have you?
I was allowed out very briefly.
It was quite a hot field, wasn't it?
It was.
I heard it was very sweaty.
It was a very hot, very sweaty field. So for those that don't understand what we're talking about, I don't just go wandering around fields hot and sweaty. It was the joys of RecFest. So RecFest is probably the biggest TA, definitely the biggest TA conference I know of in Europe, possibly in the world. Don't really know. Laying claim to that anyway, who knows? But it's 5,000 recruiters and TA leaders and TA folks in a field in Nebworth, which is a big house in the UK. And essentially a load of big tents go up, big top tents, like a circus style tent. And then a load of different vendors are there, and you just hear lots of different talks about lots of different things. Last year, I ran a stage there for the Talent Intelligence Collective and the Talent Intelligence stage. This year, there was no TI stage, but lots of chat.
Did it go that well last year, Toby, then?
It went that well. Well, it went that well that TI is now fully embedded in everything. That's how well it went.
There's no need to have a separate stage. Right, okay.
You're at the Nexus point equivalent of where Mark Zuckerberg turned around and went, we're not having a mobile development unit. Mobile has to be across everything we do.
Right,
and
this makes sense.
I'm incredibly biased, obviously. But I do think from the conversations I was having, there were some big ticket items that really people were looking at. So AI was obviously there. Not really in operationally, not really with as much effect as you'd think. So there's a lot of talk about kind of the efficiency gains and people using this stuff to drive themselves faster or getting some time back. But really, I didn't see as much chat around full-on automation or like the RPA type stuff. And I see that more from the vendor side than I was seeing in-house. And in our internal teams talking about it, which was interesting. People are experimenting, they're playing, they're having fun, they're getting some good gains, but there doesn't seem to be that kind of systematic or programmatic approach nailed down yet, which was quite interesting to see. Yeah. I think skills intelligence is a huge topic area, and I see a lot of TA leaders in particular getting pulled into these skills intelligence conversations by workforce planning or by LMD, by talent management. And suddenly they're going, what skills do we have in this company beyond jobs? So what jobs do we have, but also what skills do we have and capabilities do we have? Where do we want to be and what's that skills gap? And then it's kind of that turning to TA also going, all right, well, how are we going to deliver that? And I don't think we're necessarily at the downstream impact where TA is on the hook for delivery quite yet. And I think that's where you're going to see a lot of teams starting to invest heavily in competitive intelligence, skills intelligence to go out and aggressively target the people with the skills that they can't build themselves. So it's that buy element of the buy, build, borrow, bot. I don't think we're quite there yet because the focus is really on that internal mapping, or internal to external mapping. And then that operationalizing isn't quite happening yet, but we're getting a lot of conversation around skills intelligence. And then last but not least, as I say, TI really became the underlying foundation to everything. So whether I was in tents and talking about employer brand or recruitment marketing or internal mobility, I mentioned skills intelligence, benchmarking, org design, like every tent I was in, every conversation I was in, TI and labour market data and talent acquisition analytics was underpinning everything. And it really did become that point of TA is getting that microscope over it so heavily that the fluff metrics are just getting ripped away, and it's really is proving the ROI, proving the commerciality, and with that having the data to underpin stuff and make better data-informed decisions. So for me, I was saddened at first that there wasn't any kind of hardcore TI edge to it, and then I was happier afterwards when I realised, well, actually, there's a lot of stuff here that is TI. It's just a lot of these companies don't necessarily have a TI person to do it. And so I was quite enthused by it.
I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because if we think about TI being the context for a decision, right, rather than, forgive me, just TI, then the context for that decision sits across all of those different solutions. And we've talked before about the fact that TI teams, and Kumar can help us to kind of break this myth, hopefully, when we ask you some questions in a minute, Kumar. But TI teams typically are restricted to less than 5 people in most organisations. And so the ability for it to impact across everything in an organisation, unless context just becomes the thing that happens in all of these places, is quite limited. So yeah, I'm with you. I think it's exciting that there wasn't a stage because it's just become the norm.
Was it Toby, a little bit like when you like that niche band that nobody's heard of, and you're like, I'm cool, and then suddenly everybody likes the band, and you no longer think it's cool?
I love that as an analogy. That's awesome. So Toby, you're no longer cool. You're now just like normal pop. Yeah.
Like K-pop or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think, it is. It's exciting. I still think, if you look across the headcount, resources, etc., I still think we're under-resourced as a capability, and we're under-resourced as teams. But the very fact that the demand is being built there and the need is being built there, I think is positive. I'm slightly nervous that if and when the market becomes more aggressive, the heat that's going to get under teams to produce TI capability is going to be wild, and I don't think many teams are geared up for that. So I think I'm excited and slightly terrified for many teams, because if the market switches anytime soon, I don't think many people are in a position where they can scale up and attack this stuff fully.
Is technology going to fill that gap, though? Is the fact that tools are more accessible, possibly even AI, etc., becoming easier for the layman to get access to that information without necessarily needing a huge TI team in between to help facilitate that?
Yeah, I'd say yes and no. I think obviously we're just closing the one and done challenge with the Talent Intel Collective as well, which was the prompt engineering challenge. And I've actually had to extend it out a little bit just because the number of applications, the quality of applications. So I wanted to give it a fair crack and dive into it. What I'm seeing from that, though, is the potential is massive. The potential for scaled efficiency is massive, but the systems also need so much safeguarding and so much control. And even with some really tight control mechanisms in place and quite tight control on data sets, they're still driving certain outcomes because of how they're designed. So if you think about LLMs being, they're literally large language models that work on statistical probability. So the fact that more has been written, for example, around software engineering and the access to tech talent than anything else meant that the vast majority of the reports that came through the competition would skew towards tech talent. And my hypothesis is because it's purely there's been more written about it. So statistically, it's more likely to write about it. So I do think that it excites me in terms of the ability to get data into the hands of more people, reducing barriers to entry from a technical perspective, et cetera, et cetera. But it terrifies me slightly because we've got to have a user base that's mature enough to be able to question it I'm not sure that the end users often are quite at that level of maturity yet. So I think we're going to have probably an interim period where the technology runs faster than the capability.
And Toby, along with that, on AI bit, I think I totally agree with you. It's been a thought for like past 3-5 years that my job won't be relevant in next 5 years, but that's not the case till now. But we did a project on Gen AI. We were looking at both the roles, the consumers and the producers of Gen AI. And we did have some expert interviews because, as you mentioned, that a lot is not written for non-tech roles and in general. So we went ahead and we had a call with a startup which was helping companies for Gen AI. And there were two things which were brought out very evidently. One is maturity of the model, and second is how repeatable it is. So if you give the same, if you're asking same prompt, there are chances that response would differ from person to person basis the context and how it's going. So these were the two things which were highlighted very evidently. So yes, there are efficiency gains. Yes, we are already incorporating it in workflows. But I think as of now, we are a bit far from there. But I totally agree with the point that you mentioned.
I think that we're, of course, technology is moving really fast, but the underlying data has still got to be really solid. Whether you're talking about labour market data or whether you're talking about any other data, it's still got to be really solid in order to get any sense out of the data. I think that if we link it back to the RecFest point, where actually the underlying data is now being used by TI teams, by TA teams, by workforce planning teams, by people analytics, by strategic workforce planning, each of those is going to have a different approach to how they're using the data and what technologies they're using to maximize and optimize it. So I don't think it's going to be overtaken by AI. I think the piece that's going to perhaps become more important is the storytelling, the so what, the insight and the impact that we need to be delivering, which is a good thing, right? It shouldn't be about the data. It should be about the so what. And that can't yet be answered by a decent prompt for all the reasons that Kumar has just talked about.
And also, so listen, we recently created a dashboard, a location dashboard at Amdocs. And we were presenting it to different teams just to gather the feedback to see how it works and all. And while we were presenting to one of the HRs, that person was also linked with internal mobility team.
Yep.
And when they looked at what we were building, they were like, can you add this data point as well? And it will be a complete dashboard for us. So we were like, this is our dashboard. But then they were like, we are proposing, let's add this information and it would work for us. It will do the work that we need. So they were not even aware of something like that is happening. And one of the aspects that is the external data point that they need was being built by a team which was internal. So I totally agree with you. They won't know until they know what can be done.
Yes, 100%. 100%. Yeah, and we're all guilty, aren't we? In whether it's in HR or whether it's in finance or whether it's in software, we're all guilty of becoming siloed. And what we're seeing is that actually we're removing those silos within HR organisations, right? And that can only be a good thing. If that was one of the key points that came out of RecFest, was that actually TA is communicating much more and being involved with conversations in the wider business because of the underlying TI data, then that's awesome, right? Because it's context for a decision. And maybe we need to stop talking about it as TI and just start calling it context for a decision. It's a bit radical. But I think because you wouldn't make any other decision without the context, right? It's just randomly been the way that the labour market has been because there haven't been the challenges that we're facing now from demographics, from politics, from skills and pace of change.
And on the skill bit, Toby, that you mentioned, there are a lot of use cases that I can think of. TI being involved in skills and all. There's a team at Amdocs who's doing it. Archana and Meghna, they're leading it. But I think the biggest issue that they're facing as of now is the fragmented data set, which is already internal. So you mentioned that the teams are on that phase because that is becoming the toughest phase. they have not looked at it from the beginning. They are going to go back and correct it. So there is a lot of to and fro. But I think once that is in place, then market mapping and the skill gap analysis, a lot of things can come, linking it with L&D, succession planning, and whatnot. But I think the first phase is the toughest, which I think most companies or teams are working as of now.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
I'd agree with that. The slight devil's advocate piece, where I think people get too caught up in the we're unique and special. And I think that to a certain degree, it's like 80-20 rule. 80% of jobs are somewhat similar. It's the 20% that will vary industry to industry or company to company. That is like the variance. But I think people worry about that bit too much. Like by the time you're onboarded, by the time you've got a good grounding and you get into a company, I think a lot of the skills that we kind of pigeonhole into that, I think you can train. And I think that's one thing where I'm excited by is, yes, let's do this work. Let's get the foundation layer in place, but let's use the data to actually see where we can build more actual true mobility and skills mobility as well.
I think one of the things that's interesting about that, Toby, is one of the news articles that you talked about was the skills shortfall in construction. And I think and how that's threatening in the UK. It's threatening to jeopardise the government's pledge to build more new homes. And I think we're all guilty when we're talking about skills of thinking about kind of skills in tech organisations or skills around programme management or skills in AI. And actually, this is an organisation that's going, we fundamentally do not have people with skills in construction to do what we need to do. And they were saying that 85% of employers say that training is important for career progression in the construction industry, right? So you come in and you've got to be able to see where you can go. I think I'm right in saying, and again, forgive me, I'm flick reading, but there was something like we need almost 250,000 people by 2029 if the government is going to hit the target that it set itself. Well, 250,000 people in 4 years is an awful lot of reskilling and upskilling and training. So I think that's just one way of thinking about how skills and skills-based transformation or career pathing is way more important than just technology in many ways.
I guess with construction, there'll be, I think, the next wave of school leavers over the next 3 or 4 years, a lot of them are going to be avoiding your traditional knowledge worker roles or technology roles or anything like that because of fear of AI automating the hell out of that world. And more of them will be going to your more manual roles, or you might want to call them more kind of traditionally skilled, but not skilled with a keyboard, skilled with your hands type things. And I think that problem will solve itself to a degree because people will be avoiding office-based roles, personally.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
It's kind of, I'm talking to my lads, my two boys, and they're thinking about careers. They're 12 and 14, so they've got a couple of years to think about it at least. And both of them are like, I don't want to work with a computer. What's the point, Dad? Because I won't be needed to work with the computer in the future. And they're considering kind of skilled manual labour instead.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that. Fliss is only 11 and she wants to be a jobbing actress, so there's no hope for me, I don't think.
Mine wanted to be in esports, so I don't think I've got much chance here as well. He said he's going to live in the bottom of the garden until he makes it. Okay.
So there we go. But actually, it is a really valid point. Do I think the problem's going to solve itself? I think that might be wishful thinking. But do I think that it's going to be a big factor? Yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Any more news, Toby, or should we get on to the real reason we're here and chatting to Kumar?
The only other news really was that Meta decided to headhunt somebody to lead the AI stuff. It was $200 million to get them on board, but it's all just crazy money, isn't it? It's all that kind of return on investment piece. If you're paying someone $200 million, they're bringing in $1 billion worth of business. Woo-ha, it's all good money. So, it's a crazy situation where you've got these mega hires happening, and there's been a few of them. Meta's just the latest one. And then at the same time, EY India is introducing a new AI academy to upskill talent and try and drive the talent base there. So I think for me personally, I think we're kind of at the kind of dot-com boom bust period for AI where everyone is massively excited by it. But I think at the same time, it's going to be a kind of an interesting phase where the hype cycle kind of cools down a little bit and things land in a slightly different way.
I found the dude that they'd hired from Apple, a really, really bizarre one, because I think we'd all heard about Meta kind of sniffing around OpenAI's talent, and that was the story of the day for 3 or 4 weeks about them poaching folk from there and offering them silly money. But this guy from Apple are pretty poorly regarded in terms of how they've approached AI. In fact, things like Siri is absolutely lambasted nowadays. But even some of the other underlying technology they're using for AI is looked on as being quite archaic or behind the curve versus what everybody else is doing, versus Android and the Google stuff, etc. So to offer this guy 200 million is bonkers in my mind. I don't quite understand where it's come from, but then again, I'm not the kind of person who's worth 200 million. So who am I to tell? Who am I to know?
And on that note,
I'm sorry to the person who Alan has just lambasted. I'm sure you're brilliant.
I'm sure he is, but I don't know. I don't know if there is a single person on the planet who's worth that kind of money. If I'm honest,
he's worth at least. I'd have paid him 300 million. I
would have only stretched about 199 personally. I think that 1 million extra has tipped it over the edge for me, and I'm a no. I'm out.
I think that one of the things that's, and I don't know the details of this, but one of the things that's interesting is I think we're going to start to see much more value in the application of. So people will perceive the value in the application of AI and less about the what can you actually do and the technology and the development. And if you think about Apple historically and the way that they have pitched things and managed to do it through a marketing lens, then actually there are some really strong arguments for saying this is how something could be used. I think that's quite powerful as we stop talking about what can be done with the data and we start saying this is how it's positioned, this is how it's applied, this is how we need to learn, this is how we need to better the technology through humans.
I think that's an interesting point. I actually saw a study this morning. So sorry, I didn't send it around in advance. And it was showing that it did a big study on software engineers and their use of AI to write code. And 20% of them said they felt much more efficient and effective using this tooling to write code. But when they actually looked at the data, the people were 19% less efficient. And it's just that it shifted where they were spending their time. Instead of spending their time writing the code, they were spending their time prompt engineering and reprompting. And it was just the perception of time and perception of work. It was actually a massively inefficient process, but it just felt more efficient. And I think that's going to be interesting when we actually get into the data of how is this actually helping or not. I think there's going to be a lot of times where it would have been faster just to go back old school.
I wonder whether people are still producing work. It might be taken, as you say, in less efficiently, but they're doing it in far less time, and they're being distracted by other stuff as well. So, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, I'm now it's taking in theory my quality's down, so I'm having to spend more time re-engineering things. But actually, I'm doing it in half the time because I'm spending the other half a day on Reddit. I'm not telling anyone I'm doing that.
Or changing the prompt because the prompt doesn't tell you what you want it to tell you.
I'm really surprised to hear that stat. Having spent a lot of time in quite a social channels with developers who are claiming it genuinely is moving the dial for many of them, particularly those that coders who were okay coders are now good coders, and the more efficient coders, and they're churning far more out. It's maybe the top 100%, the top 1% who aren't seeing that much of an increase, maybe, which is often the case. It's the same with we've seen consultants, and there's that study that Boston Consulting Groups did, where they figured out that by using generative AI, their average performers became good performers, but their great performers barely moved the dial. So maybe it's a similar thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we've now talked our way around to the guy is probably worth $200 million. So on that note, can we talk to someone who's equally worth lots of money?
Of course. Let's do it. Go on then. Over to you, Alison and Kumar.
Thank you. Hi, Kumar.
Listen.
Thank you for agreeing to be on here. I think it's really exciting. The first thing that I want to ask you is that I know that you were a founder of the Dramatics Club at uni. So do you still do that?
I can act. But yeah, the team is still up and running. It's called Jazza. And I still am in contact with those guys. They still reach out to me when they're writing scripts. So it is something that fuels my soul. So
That's
yeah,
it's so cool. I think there's something about that, and the reason that's I mean, it sounds like a bit of a strange question, but I can't remember who it was. So I can't actually remember if it was your team or whether it was the AMS team. But when we talked about the makeup of what had made successful TI consultants within that team, lots of it was people who'd come from a theatrical or a musical or some sort of kind of knowledge based and creative background because they were able to tell the stories. And so I thought it was quite interesting. I don't know whether, Kumar, you think you've used any of those skills as
I,
you're kind of moving forward and building TI.
I did. So last year in this talent intelligence conference, we did start with a story. We did
Yeah.
we did dim the light and started with the story. So I think that really helped because that helped in setting the context and also got eyes of people. So they were hooked to what's going to happen. So I think it usually helps. And I think when you're presenting, when you're writing those reports, it differs from the company to company. But if there is a storyline, if we are trying to answer the problem statement which is at hand, it really helps if it's conveying a story. So yes, it totally helps.
Really interesting. So you've can you give us a kind of a 2-minute walk through your career from Smart Cube to Atlassian?
Sure, sure. So after doing my MBA, I started with the Smart Cube, a market research firm. Was exposed to the full spectrum of projects. Did even cold calling, but I think that was good. Did industry reports, vendor management, and all kind of things. So I think that really helped initially. After that, I made a move to Conferry, to Hay Group branch of Conferry, and it was very close to human capital consulting. I would say it was very close to talent intelligence, but not entirely what we do as of now.
Mm-hmm.
We were working on org structures, we were working on operating models, we were churning out reports. We did a study in which we looked at, I think, 150 odd companies, and we did sort of track how they have progressed for a few roles. So we were looking for some new roles at that time, chief data officer and something related to that, CIO. And we were seeing what's happening in the market. So there are different kind of companies. When you look at the companies based on headquarters, it could be based on how they've gone about it. The culture is different. So what we were trying to see is there a difference in culture and how it's impacting these roles? And why these roles? Because these were nascent roles. These were, at that time, the roles were up and coming. You would say that those are not nascent as of now, but yeah, I totally agree. But it was an extensive study, and we were able to see how the companies are sort of doing succession planning, which companies are sort of promoting from internal and external. So I think those kind of project. And then there was a project on merger and acquisition. Again, we did look at many M&As to see what has worked, what has not. We learned a few terms like reverse acquisition. That was a new thing that I learned, and that how that helped for work for a company. So I think if you look in a broader context, it was TI, but not the regular work that we do.
Yes.
And one day, a recruiter called me, and the person was like, "There is an opening in Philips." And I looked at the JD and I told that person that I don't do this thing. So to which the person replied, but the hiring manager uh, wants someone from this company. So I told the person that no one in this company is doing this thing. But if the person is sure that he wants someone from this company, let's schedule the interview. So that was something that the chance I took, and the person who I talked to is sitting with us. So it was supposed to be an hour-long interview, but it went for 1.5 hours. And after that interview, I just asked one question from Toby: "Do you think I'll fit?" To which he replied, yes, the skill set that is required is there. And I know that you're not doing it now, but this is what we're doing. So that was, I think, the transition from talent intelligence to the real talent intelligence. But to be very honest, it is market research from a talent lens, if you look at talent intelligence.
Yep.
So I think, and that move changed a lot, many things. I learned a lot. I think when I joined, I was the fourth member, and we were able to scale the team up to 18 when the team broke or when I left. And what I saw in that particular period was a transition of a TI function, because we talk about smaller teams, we talk about larger teams, but I don't think the maturity of the function depends on that. The maturity of the function depends on the rapport that we are able to build with the stakeholders and the trust that we have. And I'm not saying it, so these are not buzzwords, rapport, trust, no. I'll tell you why those are important. What happens is the stakeholder, they don't entirely know what we can do. We don't know what the problem statement is completely. But once that rapport is there, we then can rely on each other. I'll give you an example if we have time. So we did a project for one of the business leaders, and at that time they were very close to opening a headquarter in one of the APAC countries, and they just came to us just to get an approval or sort of validation on what they were doing. But when we did research, we found out that another location would be better suited. And there were multiple sort of data points that were supporting, along with the synergies, that is, internal synergies, which would be there. And we recommended them to change the location. It was my first project at Philips, and we were able to make that move. But what happened is there was a rapport that was built. And from the next time, the stakeholder used to come directly. And mind you, that is a business leader, that a very senior guy will reach out directly asking, hey, this is happening, and can you help? And one day, I'm sorry, Alison, I'll just wrap this up.
It's okay.
And one day the person sent me a message stating that there is a company which is opening a office in our city where we are there. Will it impact us? So just see the project that is coming. It's very open-ended, and they are reaching out to us as a strategic partner that this is happening. Should we be worried? So that was the change that came, I think, in the Philips journey of mine. The maturity that I was talking about, this is how the maturity looks.
Can we, and we'll go on to what happened after Philips, but I think that's really interesting on so many different levels, right? The first is that, Toby, hats off to you. Yeah, that clearly was skills-based hiring, right? And when I talk to organisations about skills, I go, yeah, we've been doing skills-based hiring for years, right? But we're just doing it in pockets and not systematically. But that's a great example of seeing the market research skills and seeing how they could translate in a TI world. But Kumar, you took a leap of faith doing a job that hadn't been done before, and then actually within a reasonably short space of time managed to turn that into a space where you were building rapport with stakeholders to such an extent that this was happening. And I'm making an assumption that this was a stakeholder who wasn't based in India. So equally, You're doing that virtually.
Yeah.
What do you think were the things that, if our listeners are saying, actually, I want some actionable things I can do from this, what do you think are the things that they need to be focusing on in order to build that level of rapport with a stakeholder?
So listen, first of all, I think not related to the team, but I think the culture that we had, that was really, really good initially at Philips. And I don't know if it's a positive or negative, but I was there for 3 years, more than 3 years with Toby, and he never checked or reviewed the work that I did from the very first day till the very end of the day. So I think, I don't know if it's positive or negative, but that really helped, that confidence that was there.
We don't talk about that bit. We don't talk about that.
do, because it's trust, right? That's
Yeah,
building
that's true.
trust it's building trust, but it's also building ownership, so
And
that when you are then presenting it to a stakeholder, you know it, because you're not just doing what someone's told you to do.
totally. And listen, there's an anecdote related to that. So what happened is, Toby never inquired about work, and he was like, even if you're taking leaves, there's no need to tell me and things like that. Because what happens is there you need an approval and all kind of things. But Toby was like, there's nothing like that. So I liked it very much. But in one-on-ones, I told Toby that I like the culture of the team, but do you think it is scalable? Because what happens is, as of now, I ownership is one of the values that I live by. So I think it's
Yeah.
working for us. The team is small. We are 4 or 5 of us. But what happens is, if the team grows, and I gave him an example. What happens if you are building a company? Is this replicable? Can you bring in this culture in which you're not checking on the work, you are not asking if the people are taking leaves, if they're working, from where they're working, and things like that? To which he replied, it's working because the stakeholders are happy.
Yeah.
Nothing is coming from the stakeholders. And I told him, what happens if the stakeholders are not happy and the work is not happening? And he was like, I'll ask the person to leave. That was something that came up. But yeah, I think trust is surely one of the things to build the
So,
rapport.
have trust in your team and build ownership,
Yeah,
because that helps your teams to build rapport with the stakeholders.
exactly.
What else?
Transparency is the key thing here. Listen, the data that we deal with, I don't see it being 100% correct. We'll have to be directionally correct. We'll have to be like somewhat correct basis on the geography that we are working on or the use case that we are working on.
Yeah.
So I think the best part of being in an internal team is you can be really transparent with the stakeholder. And that is when you start building that rapport. And
Yeah.
what happens is, if you're telling them that, see, if they're asking for, I'll give you an example. They asked for data, talent pool data in China. That was an ask. We don't have it. We don't have a source that can give it. But now we, as a team, that is me and stakeholder, we know that this is the problem that we have at hand. That the data is not there. What can we do next? So then the repo building starts. We took the job posting data as a proxy, and then taking the data from the government website as the base, and somehow create the data that we will be presenting to the stakeholders or to the teams. So that was possible because there was transparency. I could have just got the data, I could have shared it, but then the caveats, that becomes really important. So I make sure that whenever I'm sending across any report, I'm adding those caveats along with that this is happening and this is not.
So that's really interesting, because actually that's about sitting down with your stakeholder and saying, look, this is the reality of what we can get. Incidentally, you can now get good data on China from Lightcast. Need to just pop that in. But this is the data that we can get. The problem statement hasn't gone away. So how do we approach this together? Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to hear you talking about problem statements and solutions and transparency to build that trust. Okay, so then you and I think it's probably a good job you're not still working at Philips, Toby, based on some of the things that were just discussed then, but that's okay. Obviously, you've grown up and
for much
become...
longer.
I'm no longer managing a team.
You've obviously got much better at process now. So you then moved on from Philips and went to Walmart, I think. Is that right?
Yes. And I think the thing that lured me was to build the team. And I think I was fortunate enough to work with really good people. JJ, Randy, Asit, Randy. So I think the team there, every team has been very different to listen. And we'll try and touch upon that. Was team at Walmart that was very close to sourcing. And that helped me from a different perspective, because the work that was coming in wasn't very strategic initially. But then there was a learning on how to deal with these projects. And having Randy there, it became very, very easy, because the thought process was very different. I was thinking from a TI lens, that is very macro. He was thinking from a sourcing lens. So I think we were able to bring in both the aspects, and that really helped. So location strategies, I have done location strategy in all the companies, and it's been almost similar, looking at different parameters. At Philips, it's dashboards in which we have weights. At Amazon, it's a 6-pager, 8-pager, depending on the location, with most internal teams included. So I think that's a really good approach that Amazon is doing, because they already have that in place, in which they are talking to internal mobility, they are talking to immigration, they are talking to security. So I think that brings a lot of detail. That's not just internal, but external, but internal data as well. But at Walmart, I did a completely different location strategy. Uh, there was a problem statement. Again, you'll listen to a very different problem statement. One of the senior directors, she reached out to us and she was like, after this COVID thing, I don't think people would like to travel. And we have an office in New Jersey. What do you think? So I think this is the joy of working in TI, the sort of problem statement that you've never heard of earlier. So what we did differently here is, we looked at, there were like 5 functions. We looked at different functions. We sort of take top 100 companies for each function. And then we looked at their addresses to start with. And second thing, what we did is, we looked at internal sort of talent pool and looked at their addresses. Again, it was mass data, so not breaching any confidentiality. And we looked at a government website to see what is the travel pattern, what's happening there. And something that came up is, I can't remember exact percentages, but more than 80%, around 85%, 90%, people are not going out of the Manhattan Mayor area. And I think 70% of them are working in the boroughs in which they're living. So then we took that as a proxy, and we saw the addresses as the office addresses as a proxy for where the talent is. And we were able to build a dashboard in which we were able to identify for each function which will be the suited borough. And looking at the overlap, we were able to suggest one of the boroughs. So I think, apart from the TI new things, I think we were able to learn Power BI also. So it was first time we were working on that. And I think really cool project. Needed whole team, but a completely different location strategy. But that worked. So I think the advice was taken, and the office was there after the study. So really good project.
Really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about TI in the sourcing context? Because I think we rarely do that, right? We rarely talk about the tactical and the actionable TI in a sourcing context. So particularly when you were working alongside Randy, what did that look like?
So in sourcing, they look at mostly long listing. So I'll tell you what happened. There was one of the projects in which they were looking at a senior director in finance. And one of the ask was to look at someone which is from sort of an established company, maybe a Big Four or something like that. There was an ask, which typically happens in sourcing or even in TI. It happens as of now. But what was interesting is, we were able to bring in aspects after looking at the roles. We were able to identify, if you look at the people who were there, who were already in Big Four, as compared with the people who were very similar in the requirement, but the only missing component was that Big Four aspect. We saw a huge sort of difference in the people who did MBA and who didn't do MBA. So I'll tell you how that helps. So now, as of now, one of the ask is, the preferred requirement is the person should be MBA and all those things. But if we eliminate that, that enhances the talent pool, that increases the talent pool a lot more. We did a similar project at Philips also, in which it was PhD and not MBA. But bringing in that aspect, when the person was talking to the hiring manager, the person was able to bring that intelligence in, which was missing initially. The person was able to say that, okay, see, this profile is also there, but we'll have to relax the preferred sort of things that we have.
Really interesting. One of the things that you talked about, so as you were talking, was the example of the location intelligence work, right, which was great, and I think, forgive me, has started to become reasonably standard within TI teams as a solution and an offering.
Yep.
But as you were talking, it occurred to me that you said, a stakeholder came to us and said, after this COVID thing, I don't think. But that was a stakeholder coming to you. At what point do you think TI starts to proactively take things out to the stakeholders rather than waiting for the stakeholder to bring a problem solution? And have you seen and delivered that either within Amdocs or is it part of your plan at Atlassian?
No, it should happen. So at Amdocs, we build a dashboard for a similar case study that you're saying, user case. We did build a dashboard. But I think the repo thing that I mentioned earlier, what used to happen, Alison, at Philips was we were in contact with the TA leads for critical capability. So these were the guys who were hiring for some critical roles. It was for each region, there were different people. And what used to happen is when they were in their strategy calls with the business, they would come to us stating that this is going to happen in the business, which is very new, but that is giving a seat to TI at a very early stage. So we were able to plan the quarter, the project pipeline accordingly. So we already knew that what's going to happen. And then it became very easy for us, or it helped both of us. We knew on which location we should work, and they were also aware that we already have that slot in which we'll be working. And this happened at Amazon as well. So what we were doing is we knew that what's happening in business, and we were picking the locations which we thought would be relevant. Like, I'll give you an example. When that China thing was happening, in which I don't remember exactly, but I think for 10 years, the government asked to stay away from China or something like that. And there were many things happening. And there was a news in which the companies were looking at a second home. And I think 2 locations were coming up, Vietnam and India. Apple was the first to make that move. Not the first, but they did something which was very different. They took a location which was not coming in any location strategies. That wasn't a good location from a sort of talent perspective. And they built that location because the government help and all. But yeah, so we knew that this is happening. So we already had a thought that, okay, let's work on Vietnam, because we had that news happening and we knew that this is going to happen sooner than later. Similarly, we did a project for India. So I think it helps, and as a TI professional, if you have that understanding of the market, that what's happening, what is your company strategy, is the strategy to be close to the customers, is the strategy to be looking at low cost locations. So if you know what is the strategy at the top, that really helps you plan the projects and even the location strategies, and then you know how to approach and when to reach out to the stakeholders.
And that only comes from building the rapport that you talked about earlier. How do you think TI is evolving, and what do you think the future of it is?
TI, as Toby mentioned in the news, I think it is used in many teams as of now. They don't even know, but they're using it. And future, that really depends on the maturity of the team, where you stand. When we started, we used to do skill gap analysis manually. But then we worked with a data scientist and we got to know that it's just an hour's work. So that changed everything. And a full-fledged project that changed to just an hour's work. Recently at Amdocs, we did a project in which we were looking at correlation between job posting and attrition rates to see if we can bring out some insights. to see the residual attrition. That is, there was a lot people not moving for a long time. Can that impact a company? And yes, that can. So things like that. There was a project that came in which one of the stakeholders wanted to ask us that should I change the name of the business unit? Very strange project. But then again, you don't know what's going to happen. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, so just really thinking outside the box in terms of where it could go. Can you talk a little bit about, because we're seeing an increasing growth in TI teams and the machine of TI teams being in India. Can you talk a little bit as to why you think that's happening?
So it's not just TI, listen, it's happening with all the capability centers, the GCCs. It's a very big thing. GCC is up and coming topic in any or every call that's happening. So initially when the thing started, it was a cost arbitrage that was helping India. We were providing labor at a lower cost, but then the skills were developed and the capabilities came in. So I think now what we see is a lot of talent and at a lower cost. So I think that's a no-brainer to look at India as a sort of a provider for knowledge at a low cost. It's been happening.
It feels deeper than that, Kumar. Yeah, I mean, it feels deeper than, where do we put a GCC based on a low-cost country? It feels much more skills related than that.
It is. Like I mentioned, that initially it was cost, but then the skills came in, and as the teams were working, the skills were developing. Just giving an example, when Toby started the team in India, it was just one person. Then he took a lot many people, and now those people are leading teams in different companies. So you see how that's working. And not just that, the vendors, they are maturing a lot in India. I think there lies an opportunities for sort of TI vendors to sort of bring in a KPO kind of thing, a knowledge process outsourcing kind of thing, because it's been working in different industry. Why not talent intelligence? It can totally work.
Yeah, brilliant. I completely agree. I've got one last question. This one, I should have prompted you that it was going to come, so forgive me. Alan introduced you as, if you want to know about building a world-class TI function from scratch, then keep listening. So can you give us, 3 top tips for building a world-class TI function from scratch?
Sure. Listen, first of all, the team that I mentioned, the team that you get, the skills that are required, take it slow. The maturity would take time. I won't say that the learning curve or the maturity curve would be same for each company, but totally align it with the strategies of the company. Because one of the issue that we face is ROI. I remember initially you mentioning that TI for smaller teams is for operational things and not strategic things. I think the reason behind that is it's fairly easy to show ROI in operational things. It's not that easy to show them in strategic things. So I think if we can somehow show that it's not a cost center, but it's adding value from a dollar value perspective, that is really helpful. So aligning with the strategy of the team, working on those KPIs in which you can show the value, and then going slow, but not waiting for the team to mature. If you think that there's a maturity on both the ends, the stakeholder end and your end, we can move into different phases. You can see team doing a lot many things, can grow from a data science team to bring in those cultural aspects in M&As and whatnot. But don't curtail yourself basis the timeline that you're in. So build slow, but if you think that the team is maturing, go ahead.
Really like that. Really like that a lot. Thank you very, very much. I think, and then you talked a little bit about the rapport with the stakeholder, right? So to summarize, align with the business strategy, go slow, and make sure that you're able to deliver some operational ROI and not just the big strategic stuff. and then really building a rapport with stakeholders by showing transparency, giving ownership of the projects to people, and tackling problems directly.
Yeah, it's showing your value, Alison. So like I mentioned initially in my career, when we were able to influence that big decision of moving the office, that is, you're creating your place in the team. You're creating your niche. You're creating a requirement which is needed by the company, but they don't know it, that you can help. So I think if you can show your value, and that would come with the strategic alignment that I mentioned earlier, that would help a lot.
Yeah, brilliant. And then I've got one more silly question, which I don't suppose Toby will allow you to answer. But it feels like you've been nothing but nice to Toby through all of this. So I'd quite like to know what you can tell us about Toby that we probably shouldn't know.
I'll share something. World should know, no one should know this, but I'll try and sort of.
Kumar, remember this is a family show.
I'll try and sugarcoat it. So I do have those one-on-one with Toby now and then, Alison. And one fine day, out of nowhere, Toby texted me and he was like, "Are we even adding any value?" So it was, "Are we even adding value as TI?" I'm sure that he would have suggested something to a stakeholder and they wouldn't have agreed to it. I don't know the context, but it coming from him was a big thing. I thought, and I just replied, "Do you think Deloitte's, KPMG's, these guys, they are adding any value?" So, to which he was laughing. But on a lighter note, I think the changes that I've seen, the influences that I've made, the office location shifts, the M&As that we have suggested, and the company going ahead with those acqui-hires, I think we do add value. So, Toby, I do have an answer. So I think we are adding value to that. But I was
like 5 years later.
Yeah, see, after 5 years of existential self-doubt, Kumar, you've come up with a response.
But brought on by his manager, right? Aren't you? Just
exactly, yeah. Questioning everything.
He wasn't my manager then when he asked this question.
Oh, okay, that's all right then. I was going to say, I'm just trying to imagine, getting that WhatsApp and going,
what's the point?
Where did that come
from? He sends me one of those every day. I get a message from Toby saying, "Why do we bother anymore?" Every day, the same message. It's really depressing.
Alex, to that, there's something that a quote that I live by, that in this domain, you are as good as your last project. So if you are able to do it day after day, every time, the value will be there. But one bad project and the credibility, that goes for a toss. So you need to keep that in mind. And Alison, you can add that to the list that you asked about building a team. The credibility is one of the most important things.
I love that. And I used to say to people that perception is 9/10 of the truth. And so, yes, you're as good as your last project, but you've also, you've got to make sure that you are balancing that against what people think about you. Toby has just for our listener, I just thought I'd share this. He has just put into chat, "We're all but moments of a speck of dust flying through space, so why bother?" I think probably that whilst we are a moment and a speck of dust, we need to make the most of it, Toby. That's why.
We have to. If we are going to have to do something, just do it the best we can.
Exactly. I've got one last question, Kumar, because we are very, very close to running out of time, but I'm going to ask you. You've literally just started a new job. What's exciting you about it, or what will be exciting about it?
So first of all, I think Atlassian, a very big name in tech. The way the team is working, I really like it. I think, Alison, in one of the podcasts, you mentioned about EPAM and what they have been doing, and it's hidden. I think Atlassian is also working on similar lines. So what they're doing is, there's a product that we use. It's a product that we even offer to the sort of the customers. It's Confluence that is working on in asynchronously, but delivering the project. So it's not, so like in Amazon, we don't have PPTs. Here at Atlassian also, we don't have PPTs. It's like building a sort of web page. And how that can help? It's twofold. One, you're building a repository for which the other companies, they are building websites, they're creating hubs and all those things where people can go. But second, the AI thing that we started with when Toby was telling about the news, they do have a very robust Gen AI model. And if you just add those project repository to that Gen AI thing, that can do wonders. That can enhance the sort of TI for everyone in the company or the users that they want to use. So just imagine you try to build an internal database, you're doing all those things, but while you're working on the projects, you're working on the reports, you are building a sort of internal database and you don't even sort of know it, or you're not putting value into that. So I think a lot can be done. Really excited with this new company. Really good people. I've talked to a few, so looking forward to it.
Good. Sounds amazing.
It does.
Sounds like a great opportunity for you. But now is genuinely the time to call time. Thank you, Kumar. How was the podcast for you?
Really good. So talking to you guys, I think we met last time in September. So I think the catch-up was due. So I'm really thankful you invited me to the podcast. Really like listening to that. And one of the things that I mentioned, I used to hear to the podcast when I was sort of on a transformation journey. So just taking this stage to tell everyone that I reduced around 60 kgs in 11 months. So
of course, yes. Yeah.
So when I was doing those walks, whenever... and at that time, these podcasts were very regular. So I always waited for it, and it had them in my ear. And while I was doing my walks, I used to listen to them. So yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're not quite as regular as we used to be, so I hope you're not relying on the podcast to maintain your weight.
I changed my playlist.
It'll be very up and down.
Yeah, I changed my playlist.
I think we're getting better, guys. We are getting better this year, it feels like. We are pushing them out a little bit more regularly, a little bit more consistently, so that's great. And
last year was a bit of a blip, but we're back on it this year.
Yeah, we are back on it. And that's because we have a bunch of lovely listeners that we want to keep happy. And we'll close as ever by addressing them. So, guys, if you've enjoyed today's conversation half as much as we have, which is an incredibly large amount, do us a favour and share it with somebody else who needs to hear about it. Whether you yourself are building a TI function from scratch or looking to improve the current one you're in, or just a mildly passing curiosity about TI, tell the world about the podcast, and more importantly, tell the world about Kumar's insights during this particular episode, because they have been absolute gold. So stay curious, stay brilliant, and most importantly, stay intelligent, folks. Bye!
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kumar.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, I want to remind you about our generous sponsor, Lightcast. Here's that well-spoken fellow again to tell you about their amazing product.
Lightcast is the global authority on labour market data. By collecting, analysing and refining profiles, job postings and market data globally, Lightcast provides actionable, data-driven talent intelligence, giving HR leaders the context to make better decisions. The world's top companies trust Lightcast to deliver clarity in a complex world of work. For more, visit lightcast.io.